Hi, my name is Dana Kletke, and I'm the co-executive director of Mentoring Artists for Women's Art in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm also a visual artist, and I draw and work in mixed media. I'm located in Treaty 1 territory on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and the present, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I'm here today with Kelly Klick. I'm excited to talk about your work in the exhibition, Mother Cake. Could you talk a little bit about your background and how you came to be an artist?
My background is that I was a child of a pioneering family. I call them a pioneering family because we homesteaded in northern BC and took a cow pasture of 80 acres and turned it into a full homestead farm over many years and lots of sweat and tears. And then I made my way to Manitoba, and where I met my partner, and we raised our kids, and I became a practicing midwife. So I went to university, and I got my degree in health sciences midwifery in Toronto. And I was 20 years a childbirth educator and midwife. And so that led me to this art exhibit, because this art exhibition is all about the placenta, which is the organ that protects the fetus during pregnancy and birth. And then it's just thrown out.
Right.
Whatever.
I when looking at your work, I obviously could understand that that your work as a midwife over 20 years was definitely influential in this work and inspiring this work. And I imagine in the assisting of that birthing process and witnessing the new generations basically that were coming forward, that that's all part of the work. I'm quite interested in the word that you use, materkuchen. Am I saying that right?
Mutterkuchen, I think. The last place I worked as a practicing midwife was in the Steinbach area. And my background also runs, well, it's all over the place genetically, but I have a strong German background. And Mutterkuchen is a word that is used, is the German word for placenta, which means literally mother cake. And that's where I got my the title for this piece. And yeah, so Mutterkuchen, or I wish somebody else could tell me exactly. I'm hoping somebody out there will phone me up and say, this is how you say it. Yeah, so it is the placenta. It is the cake that the baby is protected by, and it keeps it nourished throughout pregnancy and birth. Yeah. So that's why it was really important. And in that particular piece, Mutterkuchen, there is a placenta that it's kind of all fancied up, and it's supposed to represent like a celebration, a birthday cake, to say. And there's also placenta pills. That's a very old tradition of ingesting placenta, and it's a new old practice for some women, and there's lots of controversy around it right now about whether or not women should do that. So I thought it was pretty interesting. It helped form the whole exhibit.
Right. That did have questions about those pills, if that was something that was an assistance in the birthing process, or what the pills signified. So within that pill, is that the nutrients that would have been in the placenta, or part of the placenta?
That is the placenta that has been dried and ground up and put into pill form, so that women who choose to eat their placenta can do it in a pill form rather than frying it up. Because, but some women make smoothies, some fry it, some a lot more are now using the pill form. Yeah.
I didn't even realize that was a practice. So that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And would there be mostly blood within the placenta at that point, or what would be, is there a combination of different cells?
So
Or
at that time, I've never actually done it. There are professional placenta encapsulation people who dry the placenta and do it, but most of the time the blood is not actually in the placenta. It's the blood comes from the open wound on the layer of the womb. So the blood, it comes from the womb, not from the placenta. Unless some comes from the cord, because as you can know that there's all kinds of vessels in the cord, in the placenta, and then which feed the baby. But so it's more like almost like a liver substance. So it's quite it's just its own self, to be honest, and it's spectacular, thick, meaty substance that dries quite nicely and can be put in a pill.
wow,
it's full of hormones and nutrients, and why women choose to do it is for a number of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons that they do choose to use it, my understanding is that especially if they've had postpartum depression before, or they've had pregnancy depression, which is also a thing. It tends clinically, what we've seen is that it can tend to regulate the hormones after the baby's born and reduce the risk of having severe postpartum hemorrhage. Now, Center of Disease Control and all that are skeptical. There hasn't been a lot of research done on it, which was my next point with wasted resource, is that we need to do more research on this. We need to, because postpartum depression is a huge issue. And if really we can do it with the same, helping use with the placenta, then we should be using it as a resource. So that's my next one.
Right, that makes sense. I did notice within the body of work that piece of wasted resource was quite different in its application and the color, and also with the garbage can. So I imagined that had something to do with the discarding of the placenta and whatever benefit it would have within itself for mothers, that it's discarded.
Yes, most placentas are discarded. They're incinerated in the hospital, and a few women will take them home and do ceremony, which I really do think is wonderful. And others will, take them home to ingest them. But I would say 99% of placentas end up in the furnace, which is too bad, because we're learning more and more and more that this is a resource that we haven't done a lot of research on, and that there is some research now just starting, and we're looking at it could be used for research into cancers, into, like I said, depression treatment, all kinds of things that really, and stem cells. I mean, it's full of that. So yeah. So in my piece, wasted resource, this piece, it's a piece of gold to me, and we're just throwing it out. So
Okay.
Yeah.
With your the other color palette that you're working with, it's mostly sort of white and sort of the stark red, but it's quite seductive because it's velvety, kind of
Right.
silky, and I think there might be some pearls or something shiny within the form, and I think the viewer is quite, I would think, drawn into that sort of seduction of these materials, but then finding out that it's a placenta, there's sort of like this maybe push-pull of what they're looking at a little bit. And I'm wondering if you could, and maybe even a little bit of fleshiness when you would look really close, you can kind of see a little bit more going on behind the veil. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the use of materials and maybe the meaning of the veil.
Sure. So let me see. The use of materials actually came about because I was, I wanted to give, I just retired as a midwife, and I wanted to give my midwife partners a gift. And I'm I was starting to do some rug hooking. And then all of my materials are either handed down from my own grandparents, my own grandmothers. The lace work was done by my own grandmother. The cut glass was my grandmother's. But the other pieces were all thrift store finds, but they all do have meaning. The veils are wedding veils. The wool came from my mother. It's a very velvety wool. It's very much like the substance that when you're just looking at a placenta, it looks like that. So all these pieces have come together to kind of celebrate women's work, not only of, producing another person, but producing a fantastic organ that does its job and then is discarded. We can sometimes think of that, right? Like all this work that goes into this lace, and all the work that goes into a marriage, and all the work that goes into getting sugar and tea on, and all those things, and making lace tablecloths, and those things they're not big on the first things you think about when you think of women's work, and the impact that those items can have. Obviously, impact of a soul of a person is a big one, but all these other things, so that's what makes us us. And I remember my grandmother by her lace work and her cut glass and things like that. So all these pieces have meant a lot to me, and I'm hoping that they spark conversation. I have heard people say, "Oh, my grandma had a brown Betty just like that." I was like, yes, that's what I want to hear. And the other parts of it too was this whole thing was put together during COVID. And I, as a rural artist, I really don't have a lot of thrift stores to go to, or I'm trying to do all my pieces by secondhand and thrift stores and friends and whatever. So my friends all came to my rescue. So I just put it out on Facebook. Hey, I need some red cord, and I would get 5 back. Oh, I got some from Christmas. I'll leave it on the door for you to go and get. So there's a lot of my community in this work as well. Obviously it's not evident, but to me, it's really special.
Well, that's wonderful, especially finding your materials that way, and being gifted those materials, and also using the historical items from your family. It's one thing that I noticed about your connection with your great grandmother, your
Yes.
grandmother, your mother, through these materials and through the process of creating, but also because the placenta is also about mother, and there is a lot of meaning there that I see. One of the works, I think it's called Mother's Helper.
Yes.
The placenta is sort of resting on a surface and the cord is draped across the stool. So there's evidence of someone witnessing that birth or assisting with that birth because
Right.
of the stool. And in the work, Herbal Persuasion, I sort of read it as there's some sort of interaction there with that teapot, with herbs, and maybe assisting with the mother's birthing process.
That's right.
And then I wasn't sure about those pills, which we talked about. So I'm wondering if you could talk about, it seems like interruption or disruption or assisting is all part of that work. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. What this is about is that I, as the midwife, has invited you as my apprentice to come with me to witness the birth of a child. But as my apprentice, I'm asking you to focus not on the baby or the mother, but to focus on the placenta because of its importance. So in part of your learning to become a midwife, I want you to really focus on this. And what are we going to do? So the very first one, Tree of Life, is we've just gotten to the mother's home, and we're doing we're listening to the baby and making sure everything's okay. So the baby's still inside. The tree of life is still working. I'm hearing the heart tone. And so I'm asking you, well, what do you think that placenta is doing? Like, is it, yeah, it's working really well. Things are good. And then as the baby's being born, you have happy birthday, which is an oil painting of a baby just born, still attached to the placenta. The placenta is still inside mom, and we are going to, I'm asking you as my apprentice, so what is the placenta doing now? And what should we do about it? And mostly we should just leave it alone, wait for it to stop pulsating. And that's what we're doing. The next one is vigilance. The time after the baby's born is can be a very dangerous time for mom. And while the family is focused on the baby, I want you as an apprentice to be focused on the expulsion of the placenta, because this is really important. So vigilance is exactly that. We're waiting. She's bleeding a little bit. There's a little bit of a red ribbon coming down from the uterus. And we can see that she's bleeding, but it's not too bad. It's okay, but we're vigilant. So we have to think, what are we going to start doing? And so then I'm going to ask you, well, what are your options? And you're going to say, well, just like the last place I delivered babies, they had a special tea that was used to try to deliver the placenta. Because we only have about half an hour before we need to start really worrying and do something. So we're going to start thinking about the tea, which is herbal persuasion. She can have some of that. But one of the best things we can do is to put her in a position that'll help the uterus to contract and the placenta to be born. So we're going to put her on the stool. And that's a birthing stool. She wasn't already on the birthing stool. She can be on it to help deliver the placenta. And we see that all the time. We see that at a home birth, or we see that at a hospital birth, where we often put the mom on the toilet, to be honest, just to get her into a gravity helping persuasive position. And in this piece, Mother's Helper, you can see that the placenta has come. And so we're like, whew, okay, we're all right. She's not bleeding. It's all good. We're going to have a little celebration. We're going to have a little birthday cake. Mother Kuchen is on the table. And then we're going to throw it out. Wasted resource. And then, however, before we throw it out, why don't we make a placenta print out of it, which is the very last RESPECT, respect. So we take some acrylic paint and we paint the placenta and the cord, and then we put some paper over it and take the paper off, and then you have this beautiful print of the tree of life. So it's almost a circle. And you've done a fantastic job as my apprentice. And we're all okay. Everything's good. So that's the story.
Wow, that's an amazing journey. And I could, I knew that there was a connection through all the works, and I could see that. And it's that's really thank you for explaining that in depth. It's really enriching. And the way your materials flow through the different pieces and connect in that way as well. I was wondering about the painting because it was a little different than the sculptural work and how that played into the work. So, especially because it's 2-dimensional as opposed to 3-dimensional.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about that in a way, or is it just to distance from the work, from the placenta, or to focus on the placenta?
It's to that at that point in a birth, everybody's focused on the baby. Everybody's focused on the baby. And I wanted to kind of tie it in with the placenta print as well. That's why it has they both have the same frame on them. Because of course the baby is that's the prize, right? A healthy, newborn, lovely child is what every pregnant woman wants. And so connecting it with the placenta print and also having the placenta attached to the baby through the frame is to focus, is to remind us really that the placenta is still connected, the mother and the baby are still connected, and that the cutting of the cord, which has become such a ritual in our society, is really an important one, and which disconnects the mother from the child forever. And we often, when we do it, I always sang happy birthday when we did it. Dad always cut, not always, sometimes mom cut the cord, sometimes grandma, sometimes whoever, but I always sang happy birthday. That's why I called it that. And very few, if anybody's thinking about the placenta at the time of that, except for the midwife and her apprentice, because that's a pretty big, important part of it. So I think I don't know if that answered your question, but that's where I go.
That totally answers my question. Actually, I was speaking with a friend of mine who is a mother. I'm not a mother, so I don't have that experience. And she was telling me about how the cutting of the cord, she felt so connected to her baby, but then the cutting of the cord was very symbolic for her. And but she wasn't able to touch the cord or the placenta or in the way that she gave birth. So I think it's really lovely that there is an option to in other birthing situations. So
you'd be surprised how many people talk to me about, I never saw my placenta. What's a placenta? Like, I've had 5 kids. What's a placenta? Like, it's really something that is not focused on at all. So it's good. It sparks conversation, and I hear all kinds of birth stories, some really sad and some fantastic. So it's, I was walking a fine line with this too, because I know that there's a lot of people that haven't had babies or have had losses. So I deliberately tried to make it a bit comforting. That's why I used a Brown Betty instead of something a little bit more clinical, because my first thoughts was to make it quite clinical, but beautiful. And this will bring us into our next discussion, but Brenna was fantastic at helping me to bring about a thought or the overriding feeling that I wanted the audience to have. So that was really important.
Can you talk a little bit more about your mentorship with Brenna and what else you've gained from that experience?
You bet. The Rural Artist Mentorship Program has been unbelievably educational and just fantastic. I would highly recommend it to anybody who is interested in becoming a professional artist. She has been a super mentor. And I have to give it to her for doing a 360 with all of this, having to do everything by Zoom instead of in-person meetings and just having to do that kind of thing. It's just, as it's not easy. So we've learned everything, every little details from how to write an artist statement, how to write an artist CV, the difference between an artist CV and a regular CV. I personally, she helped me a lot to simplify and strengthen my work. I had way too many things in each piece, which is why I ended up with a full sort of a series, because one piece suddenly became 3 or 4. And I really honor that. It's really, really helped with that. We've also learned on how to build our practice, to get in there every day, or build habits on top of habits, and how to do put our exhibition together, which we're in the middle of, and it's just been fantastic. I couldn't say anything bad about this. It's been super good.
And it's not quite over yet.
No,
so still some more meetings. Yeah. So that's great. And that your collective, your group, is continuing to meet towards and working towards a couple of shows, which is exciting.
Yes, that's right. We've decided to apply to a number of galleries rural galleries who might be interested. We have two, my own Pinawa gallery. We're going to do, I think, probably in November, hopefully. And then I just talked to Nipawa and they're interested for January. So we are going to have a couple other group exhibitions together as well. So that's really good. So Kelly Murray, Alexandra Ross, and Cyndi Wiebe, myself. I think this is going to be a group that we're going to just help each other forever as rural artists, and that's so important.
That's really, really wonderful to hear. And that mentorship has brought you together, and it gives, everybody needs mentorship at different points in their lives. Like,
absolutely
is a very unique thing, and it seems like everybody in your group has really gotten a lot out of each other as well, that dialogue.
Absolutely. Yeah. We all have different strengths. And it's been just really nice to know that you have somebody who has a specific strength that you can, call up or text or whatever and say, hey, what do you think about this or whatever? And just learning how to do peer review on this kind of basis it's been very, very good.
What are you working on now? Are you continuing with this series? Are there going to be more, or is it sort of the circle is now complete with this, or are you continuing on? What's next?
I'm not sure. It's going to come to me. It hasn't come to me yet, but it will. I'm dabbling with a number of things, but this series came to me, so I have all faith that the next series or the next whatever will come, hopefully soon.
And
but it will come.
Yeah, it will. There's probably a time after doing a big piece that has multiple components to really look at that as a grouping of works to then think you can see it in a different way, and then moving on to the next project.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like the audience to know about the exhibition before we wrap things up?
I just think I think that the exhibition is so diverse that I think there's something for everybody in it. And I think everybody will learn something and really enjoy it. And I think all of us are an artist to watch. Really, I think we're just kind of emerging into this, into the Manitoba, Canadian, and international art scene. And I'm hoping. I think it's going to be fantastic to see where we all go with it.
Well, great. I'm looking forward to seeing too, and hopefully seeing your work in person one day, because I imagine seeing those sculptures in person will have a different impact than seeing them online.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can see more the 3D of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the details, really spend some time with it. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for taking me through the journey of your work and in so much detail, and best of luck in your next project and on the exhibitions.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.